Evening.
Kavod Harav, how are you?
Hashem, thank you. Okay. So we said yesterday, the tour, it says, right, how do you do Zimun? How do you designate an animal for use on Yom Tov? So you say, right, I'm going to take from this program. Regarding that, says the Bet Yosef, brings the source for this. Mishnah beperek kama de betzah. So Mishnah in the first perek of betzah, Bet Shemai omrim lo yitol ela im ken na'ana b'od yom. So Bet Shemai holds you're not allowed to use that animal unless you picked it up during the daytime. What does it mean during the daytime? Before Yom Tov. But Bet Hillel says, no, you don't have to pick it up. Just say so, you know? I'm going to take this and this. The Adua de halacha ke Bet Hillel, right? And the halacha is like Bet Hillel, as usual. So says the Ran, just want to tell you one thing, by the way. As I just told you, right? Halacha is like Bet Hillel, as usual. Usually the halacha is like Bet Hillel, right? You know that, right? You're aware of that. So, I just want to point out something interesting. In the Talmud, it talks about this, by the way, why the halacha is like Bet Hillel and so forth and so on. But in the Zohar Kadosh, it says something interesting there. It says that the reason why we paskin like Bet Hillel is because they're usually lenient. So the Zohar says that it's always more proper that the halacha should be like the lenient opinion. Interesting. Right? Why is that? Because it's a matter of chesed, kindness, You're being kind to the Jewish people by being lenient with them. So therefore, right, there's a concept of kindness and din, right, judgment. So the world works on both concepts, right? So says the Zohar, the kindness has to be always higher than the din, stronger, more dominant, right, more prevalent. So that's how you do it, by making the halacha like the lenient opinion. That's what it says. So this is the reason why the halacha is like Bet Hillel, according to Zohar Kadosh. Okay, anyway, getting back to what we said, right? Says the Ran, Miu aminan begemara the dafka beomer ze v'ze ani notel. Right, that's only, it says in the Gemara, when you say, right, I'm going to take this and this, aval beomer mikan ani notel. But if you say I'm going to take from there, right, you didn't say this and this, you said I'm going to take from there. So that, says the Ran, the machal lo sagis is not good enough. In other words, you can't designate the region. You have to designate the animal. The apagav the havale lemishrei ki agavna mishum berera. So it says, even though, we should have apparently allowed that because, the concept of brera, right? So what is brera? Brera means it's like there's a term in English, I have to remember it. But anyway, right? I'll describe it to you, and you'll understand what it means. Brera means that what you decided, what you designated, is decided by a future outcome of some scenario, a future decision. Right. So in other words, what we say in brera means like this, right? If you didn't say which one you were going to take, you said I was going to take from that area, but then when you took it, it's considered to be like, right? You chose it retroactively, right? Yeah, that's the word that I was looking for, right? It's a retroactive decision, which becomes binding. That's called brera. So Ron says apparently, right, we should have allowed this because of brera. But he says, nevertheless, we don't allow it. Why is that? Because we're afraid, right, that he's gonna, first, he'll right he's gonna pick out between the skinny ones and the fat ones. The fat ones usually taste better. You know what I mean? Those skinny guys, they got no taste. Whatever, right? So. So then, right, what's going to be is that since he's going to, carry the skinny one and then reject it and take the fat one, so it comes out that the skinny one, he carried that for no purpose, right? This is the problem. And regarding that, we cannot say brera, right? That it's retroactively decision. Why? Because you rejected it, right? You took it and you rejected it. That's not called brera. Brera means the one I choose now is going to be, right, retroactively, which the one I meant. But here you're taking, one and rejecting and taking the other. It cannot work like that. So therefore, it doesn't turn out good. Okay. Good. And alternatively says, I'll give you another thing, another reason, right? The mishtachet kulhu kechushim v'atel leimnue misimchat yom tov. So it also could be, right, that all those will turn out to be, skinny ones, and then, he will refrain from doing simcha yom tov. That's another reason why we don't want that. So therefore, that the proper way to designate, says the Ran, is to say, I'm taking from this and this, right? So meaning what? Those fat guys over there, I want those guys. That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a good dinner, you know what I mean? Nice, delicious, juicy, right, steak there, you know what I mean? Come on. I don't want those skinny guys. Right? That's a waste of time, And so that's the thing. Okay. So therefore, right, the conclusion is you have to say, I'm taking from this and this, right? In other words, point out which animal you're intending to take, right? That's what we want. But you don't have to pick it up, like Bet Shammai says, right? We don't go that far. Okay. מאחר שאינו מקפיד למשמש בהם, so since he's not particular to actually grope them, whatever, כבר נמלך עליהם בדעתו, so he already decided, right, change his mind, whatever, שמנים בין שהוא חושים בין שהוא שמנים בין שהוא חושים, so he decided, right, to take them whether they're skinny or fat. ולא עתה לטלטל ולמשפק So therefore, he won't, take one and then reject it, right? Because he can't do that now. He only designated, a specific one or specific two. That's it. כי אמינן דמהנה זימון דווקא במדדין, אבל במפריחין, right? So he says, that which we say, right? We talked about this yesterday, that designation, actually works. This is only regarding the ones that jump, the younger ones, right? But the ones that fly, forget about that, right? דהאמינן בפרק אין צדין, חצד יוני שובח ויוני עלייה וציפורים שכיננו בתפיחים ובירות חייב. So right, it says there that the Gemara there, that he's liable, right, if he does this, if he traps animals like that. Okay. How can I show no? That's the end of it. Rabbi Yerucham also says like the Ran. So yeah, that seems to be the halacha here. Okay, so let's see the Shulchan Aruch. So says Shulchan Aruch, Ketzat hu azimun, right? How do you designate the animal? What do you do? Right? Omer ze veze ani notel lemachar. Right? You say, I'm going to take this and this tomorrow, right? Then tzarich lena'anam. You don't have to pick them up, right? אבל באומר, מכאן אני נוטל למחר, but if you say I'm going to take from this area tomorrow, לא סגי, that's not good enough, right? As you said, right? So he passes here, like the Ran, who said, right, that's not good enough. Okay, that's it. Right, pretty simple. Let's go to Yud Aleph. So it says here, Bet Yosef, Katu B'Agarot Asheri, right? It says in the right in this book, Perek Kama de Betzah, the first chapter of Betzah, En Adam Yachol Liazmin Ela Lefi Ma Shehu Tzarich. So it says a person can only designate, whatever he needs, right? That's it. So but if he did more, that's not called, designation. So in other words, don't be a wise guy and say, oh, gee, I'm designating the whole flock, like, yeah. So what does that help you? That means they're all the same. So what kind of designation is that, right? You don't need that much, What are you going to feed the army, right? What are you going to do, right? You're going to invite the whole battalion over? So, what do you need the whole flock for, right? So you don't need that. So that's not called designation. Designation means you single out only what you need, right? More or less, right? That's it. Okay, that's one piece. Then we have another piece here. So he says here also, Katav od Rabbi Yerucham, right? Rabbi Yerucham also says, Im zimen kol hashovach v'eno tzarich ela lezug eno mo'il, right? He also says the same thing. Like if he designated the whole, dovecote, right? The whole nest, whatever, right? Of birds, that doesn't work. But what do you need the whole nest for? What are you doing, right? You're having a a party. What's going on? Right? You're inviting 50 people. What do you need all that stuff for? So right, that's not necessary. Tosfot also says like that. So we see, right, that several commentators mentioned this concept, right? That you shouldn't designate the whole bunch. What do you need that for? So it's not valid. Right? So it says, Perush, ואם אפשר שיצטרך לכולן, מזמין כל השובח, ומחר נוטל כל מה שצריך, right? But it says also, right, that if it's possible that he's going to need the whole thing, so then he can actually do it, right? No problem, If he really needs it, right? Okay? So, you're having a big gathering. You know what I mean? Okay, so you're inviting 100 people. You're making a bar mitzvah, right? Whatever, I don't know. Right? So that's something else. Okay, so then you may need the whole thing. That's a different story. But if you don't need it, cannot do it. Okay, so let's see the Shulchan Aruch here. So says the Shulchan Aruch, im zimen kol hashovach ve'eno tzarich el hazug, if he designated the whole, dovecote, right, whatever, but he only needed like two of them, and no more. That doesn't help. That doesn't help you. That doesn't do the job, as we said, right? So Ramah mentions what we just said now, right? Which is, ואם הוא אפשר שיצטרך כל השובח, יכול להזמין כל השובח ומחר נוטל מה שצריך. So the Ramah says, right, if it's possible, you need the whole thing. So you can designate the whole thing, no problem, right? And then take tomorrow whatever you need, right? It may be a little bit less, but you designate the whole thing because you may have needed it. So if that's the case, then it's allowed. Okay, good. So let's go to the next one. If you have any questions, let me know. I know you all have ranches and barns in your house, right? I'm sure. Okay. I'm sure you have your livestock owners, right? All of you. Okay. So let's go to the next one. You bet. Yeah, so this one we'll read the Torah. Let's see the Torah. Right, so it says the Torah like this: Zimen shechorim umatzah lebanim. Right. Let's say he designated black ones, right? Black birds, and then he goes out there, right, on Yom Tov, and guess what? Right, they're all white. Oh my God! Right, what's going on? Right? Oh, Yifchar, or the opposite, right? Whatever, right? We're not racist over here, right? Everybody's equal. So, bet umatzah gimel, and let's say he designated two, and then he found three. So it says the Torah, peshita de asurin shasurin ela afilu zimen. So it says it's they're all forbidden. These. Why is that so? Why are they all forbidden? Because we're assuming, right? Obviously, especially in the first case, right? We're assuming that those are not the ones they designated, right? Otherwise, maybe he's colorblind. I don't know whatever it's like. But he couldn't be the ones he designated. They changed their color, right? Whatever. So it cannot be. Also, the other case, which is that he designated two and he found three, right? So now we have a concern that maybe those three are not the same. Right? For sure, at least one of them is not the same, right? As the ones he designated. So you got a problem. That's why you can't take them. Okay. Good. So not only that, so it says a tour even furthermore, right? Even more. אלא אפילו זימן שחורים ולבנים, ומצא שחורים. Let's say he designated black and white, right? Both. And then he found only black. מקום לבנים, ולבנים מקום שחורים, the other way around, right? Asurin, they're all forbidden. Zimen Gimel Matzah Bet, if he designated 3, right, and found 2, mutarin, those are allowed, he says. So, right, why would it be allowed in that case? Because, right, if there was 3 and now there's 2 left over, so you know that all those you designated, right, because you designated 3 of them, so you're good. You're good to go. Okay, good. What about if you designated inside the dovecote, right? And now you find them outside. Different location, right? Change of venue, as they say, right? Velo betocho, right? And you didn't find inside, just outside. So those are forbidden. So I guess the reason why they're forbidden, right, is because we're assuming those are different ones. They're not the same guys. So it says if there is no other nest there besides that one, dovecote, right? Whatever. Mutarim, then they're allowed. Why? Because we assume, right, those are the same ones, because they have nowhere else to go. They have no alternative, residence, right? That's all they got. Okay. בתוך הקן הוא מצא לפני הקן ולא בתוכו אסורים ואם אין שם קן אחר מותרים כגון שאינו פורח דלקה דמיתלה דעתו מעלמא. So he says we're talking about a case where they don't fly, these birds, right? So therefore we're not really concerned they came from a different area altogether. They're just like close by, they're local birds, not foreigners, right? Whatever, right? Not immigrants. So therefore, what happened? It just like jumped around a little bit, right? And that's it. So he says, since it can't fly, this birdie, right? Even if you have another dovecote, right, which is within 50 amot, right, which is 25 meters, there will be possible to jump around. If he's not standing, right, in a way that it's possible to see him, he's standing in the corner. It's loud. Why? Because it didn't jump from there to here. Because you can't see his nest, right? The angle is not there, right? Can't see the angle. Okay, interesting. A lot of interesting bird talk here. All right, so let's see the Beit Yosef, right? Get some more clarity in this, a little bit fuzzy, all this story here. Okay, so says Beit Yosef. Where's the source for all these halachot? Mishnah beGemara. It's a Mishnah and Gemara. Where is that? Sham Yud Amud Bet. Masechet Betzah, right? So it explains over there the reasoning, right? What's going on? So if there was 2 and then you found 3, right? What's the problem? Asurin, they're forbidden. Why? Because either way, there could be also they're different birds altogether. And then they're different birds. Even if they're not different birds, but there's one that's mixed up there, right? Extra guy, right? So that guy, we know we didn't designate him because he's number 3, right? We only had 2. So it's a problem. Okay. Good. The Katwa Tosot says Tosot regarding this, V'aran and the Ran. Ve'leka lemishrin hu mishum dechad b'trei batil. So, good. These rabbis picked up on something interesting here. So what they're saying is, right, that don't try to now, be a wise guy and say like this, right? They should be allowed. Why? Because of nullification, right? So what does that mean? Right? That one extra bird gets nullified with the two original birds. It's a nullification. Right? So, you don't need to nullify here in 60th, right? It's even majority is enough. Okay, so good question. So what's the answer? The Bale Chaim Chashiva velo batle. So says Tosfot in Iran, you can't nullify them. You know why? Because they're living creatures, and living creatures don't get nullified. Oh boy. There you go. Why don't they get nullified? Because they're prominent, right? There's a prominence there. They're important, So they don't get nullified. So there's another thing, right, which we already mentioned before, in a different concept, in a different topic, right, but it's similar, right, that this is called davar sheyesh bo matirin. What does that mean? Eventually it'll be allowed, right? So therefore you cannot nullify, right? When something is going to be allowed in the future, there's no nullification. So when is this going to be allowed? After Yom Tov, right? It'll be allowed, no problem. The weekday, right? No problem. So wait till tomorrow. No big deal. Right? Okay. So then he goes on. So now we're talking about the black and white, right? The birdies. So what about that case, right? So says Bet Yosef, right? Explains there in the Gemara. What's the reason for this? So obviously, right, what we say is that these must be different birds because they're different color. So I mean, what would you think, right? They're the same birds, but they, right? Somebody painted them. What happened over there, right? Okay. וכתב רבינו ירוחם, says רבינו ירוחם, בכל זה מיילה שאין מכירינו, right? So it says, that's only upashutu. Says, we're talking here about when you don't recognize them, Makiran. In other words, you're not really sure, who these birds are. Because if you know who they are, then you know them. I mean, there's nothing to talk about. So we're talking about when you don't know. So when you don't know, you have to assume, right, that these are different birds. They're different color. Whatever, it's a little bit strange. I don't know exactly why he has to mention this, that you know them or not. Because, they're different colors. So how is it relevant to say you know them? Okay, whatever. Anyway, right, I'm not really sure what he means by that, but right? It says Agod Hashiri, Zimen Shchorim Belevanim, right? So he says there, what about if he, right, as we already mentioned this, right, in the Torah. Let's say he designated both, right, white and black. כגון בקינים המובדלים במחיצה. So he says, for instance, we're talking about right, that in the dovecote, right, there are partitions there, and they're separate, the birds. כדרך קינין שבשובחים, אבל בכאן אחד ודאי תפיך ומותרים, right? So it says, so in other words, he's telling you, if you designated both of them, right, black and white, so he's telling you, right, that if it's there's no partition there, and it's like all one area in a dovecote, so then they're allowed. And but if there's partition there, it's not allowed. Okay, I'm not exactly sure what he means by that, but let's see the Shulchan Aruch, we'll understand a little bit better. Okay. All right, so let's take a look here. So Zimen Shnayim u'matzah shlosha, right? He designated two and then he found three. What's halacha? Right? Or zimen shechorim levanim bekinim muvdalim b'mechitzah, matzah shechorim b'makom levanim, levanim makom shechorim. Right. So now it's more clear right here. So what are we talking about? Right. We're talking about a case where he designated both black and white. Right. But there was a partition there. They're separate. And then all of a sudden, right, he comes back the next day on Yom Tov. And he found, right, it's the opposite. You know what I mean? The black is on this side and the white is on the other side, right? They switch sides. Right? So then he says they're forbidden unless he recognizes them, right? If he recognizes them, it's no problem, right? But otherwise, we assume that these are different birds. Why is that? So the reason is because there was a partition there, so how did they switch? You know what I mean? That doesn't make any sense. But if there was no partition, so then it's okay. Why? Because they just switch sides. They jump around in there. No big deal. But if there's a partition, how did they come up on the opposite side? Right? That cannot be. Not likely. So therefore, we say it's forbidden. So all these cases are forbidden, the ones that he mentions here, right? Which ones are we talking about? Designated two, found three, right? That's one, right? Right, the other case is there was black and white, there was a partition, and now they switched sides all of a sudden, right? How did that happen? We're not talking about David Copperfield, right? He did a magic trick over there. So how did they get on the opposite side? No, it must be, right, that these are not the same birds. It's likely that it's not. I can't tell you that it's impossible, right? But it's possible, but not very likely. Okay, so that's the story. So we've talked about birds and animals a lot. Baruch Hashem. Okay, so as I'm doing this chapter, I'm thinking to myself, maybe I should have skipped it, because it's not really so practical for us. But we're almost done, so it's too late now to skip it. So we'll just go through it. What can I do, right? So now we have the next case, right? Which is Zimen Shloshel Matzah Mutarim, right? What about if he designated three and he found two, right? So there it's allowed, as we said, right? Because we assume, right, that one guy left, and the two of them stayed, so these are the ones you designated, no problem. So it says in the parentheses here, even if they were tied together, right? Right? So it says sometimes, they can just break it and leave, slip out. So even if they were tied together, it's possible that one of them left. So therefore, it's allowed, right? According to this opinion here. Okay, interesting, right? It's okay, so makes sense. Now we're going to the next case, right? But before we go to the next case, let me just see if we're caught up on the Bit Yosef. Maybe we have some more to read here. Just make sure we're caught up. Yeah, so we have some Bit Yosef to read here. So I'll read those before I go ahead. Okay. So let's see if we can finish off these two. We'll try. So now, right, we're talking about the case where he designated three and he found two. So regarding this, Bet Yosef says, right, he brings the source for this. Gamze Mishnah Sham, right? This Mishnah over there on Paresh Begimara explains the Gemara. My time, right? What's the reason? Hane inhu ninhu, because they're the same birds, right? Just one of them left. L'chad minayu azil le'alma ve'afilu im haniach shlosha mikusharim. So he says, right? Even if he found that, not that he found, but when he designated them, they were all tied together. Uva umatza shnayim bilvad, and he found only two. Kama Ravashi the Share. Even there, Ravashi says it's mutar. It's allowed. So he says, because it could be that they slipped out, which is very common with birds, whatever, right? They're very, slippery, right? They're very acrobatic. They can slip out. Okay, so good. So he says, right, there's a question over here. Why did the poskim write this halacha, right? Interesting. Could be that the reason he says because Rabbi only said this according to the one who says when do they argue, these two rabbis? Right. So that means like he left 200. Right. I'm sorry, one more time. Yeah. So he left 200 and he found 100, which is like a different case, but it's similar to this case. The Rabbi Amar Mana munach umana mutal, right? So over there it talks about this issue, right? It's talking about money there, that the question is, right? Let's say you left 200, right? Dollars, let's say, right? Somewhere. And all of a sudden you come back and you only find $100, right? So the question is that the same money or is it different money? That's similar question to what we're doing, right? They're talking about money, we're talking about birds. That's the only difference, right? So, okay. Rabbi Amar, so Rabbi says in that case, maneh munach, maneh mutal, right? So he says it's the same thing. So no, the rabbis say no, it's not. It's not the same thing, right? We assume that this is like a different batch, right, of money, whatever it is, right? Whatever it was there. Yeah, now that I look at it, right, I think he's not talking about money, he's talking about crops, but it's all the same. It's all the same idea. But anyway, right, הכל פולין בכיס האחד הוא דפליגי, אבל בשני כיסים דברי הכל מונח מנה מוטל. So he says they only argue in a case where there's only one purse, right, whatever, one bag. But if there's two of them, they all agree that it's the same. Because according to one who says, right, that there are two purses, מחלוקת, אבל בכיס אחד דברי הכל חולין, then it's a dispute, but when it's one, it's everybody agrees that it's חולין. לא צריכים לעוקם במקושרים, right? So you don't have to talk about, that they're tied together. You don't even have to qualify it like that. Because the mashma b'gemara, like it implies in Gemara, והפוסקים סוברים דהלכה כמאן דאמר בשני כיסים מחלוקת. So poskim hold, right, that the halacha is like the one who says that there's a machloket about two of them. לכן פסק הרמב"ם, that's how the Rambam paskins, פרק ו' פסוק מעשר שני, right? And laws of מעשר שני. וכיוון שכן לא צריכים לעוקב מקושרים. So therefore he says you don't have to really qualify this, that it's talking about they're tied together. ולפיכך לא הזכירו כן, right? So he says that's why they didn't mention it. ואפשר דסבר דחמא דמקושרים היו אמינן כולהם נתלו right, so in other words, it could be that the poskim who didn't mention it, the reason why they didn't is because they hold that when they're tied together, it's not the same halacha, like we saw in this Gemara, right, in the different Gemara. So therefore, right, that's why they didn't bring it here, because they thought that wasn't the halacha. Umiu, Rabbeinu katab b'sof siman taf lametet. Rabbeinu says, eser umatza tesha. So he says, right, that that which he left 10, right? And then he found 9. צריך לבדוק אחר כולן. So he says there, right, to check all of them. דווקא בשקושרים יחד, that's only when they're tied together. אבל אם אינם קשורים, but if they're not tied together, ביחד, אין צריך לבדוק, you don't have to check. אלא אחד, only one of them, והיינו אליבא דמאן דאמר, it's according to one who says, בכיס אחד, we're talking about מחלוקת, is talking about one purse. כמו שכתבתי שם, like we wrote over there. Okay, so he's comparing one case with the other, the other case is similar to this, right? Trying to learn from one to the other. But they're similar, they're right, similar concepts, just different merchandise, right? That's what it is. ואם כן, סובר שהלכה כמותו, וכיוון שכן, יש לתמוע למה לא כתב כאן דהד דזימן דשלושה ומצא שניים מותרים. So it says, therefore, right, he should have written this halacha if that's the case. That, if he designated 3 and found 2, it's mutar. אפילו אם אחד מקושרים, if they're tied, נמי מותרים, they're mutar as well. Even if they're tied together. ואפשר דכיוון דכתב סתם זימן שלושה ומצא שניים, מותרים אף אם הניחם מקושרים למשל. So answers Bet Yosef, it could be, right, that he really holds that way. That even if they're tied together, it's allowed. He just didn't mention it, he just said, right, 2 and 3, but 3 and 2, I'm sorry. But he didn't mention that they're tied together. But since he said it in a general manner, he meant in any case. Doesn't matter whether they're tied together or not. Okay, could be. Okay, so let's see Shulchan Aruch here. Yeah, so we'll do the next one next time, but we'll see the Shulchan Aruch here. It's a little bit long. Right, so a second. Says Shulchan Aruch, Zimen Shlosha Matzah Shnayim, right? We already read this, So again, right, if he designated 3 and found 2, mutar, it's allowed, right? Some parentheses he brings, right, even if they were tied together. And that's how the Bet Yosef paskins, right? Even if they were tied together. That's halacha. So why is that? Because they tend to slip out, so they, it's not really a big wonder that that one of them got away, even though they were tied together. So therefore, we assume they're the same birds. Okay, very good. I guess we'll stop there. Next time we'll do the next one, which is next week, right? Tomorrow is Friday and Shabbat, and so we'll see you guys on Sunday, B'ezrat Hashem. Right, and we'll continue our discussion on Yom Tov. Hopefully we'll get to more, practical things, I'm going to be a little bit more mindful, to maybe skip, the things which are not so practical. So, we'll see what happens there. But anyway, right, Shabbat Shalom. Thanks for coming. Be blessed with wealth and health and happiness. Yeah, I heard some good news today. They killed like 50 Nazis today in Gaza, whatever, right? In Lebanon. There's still some more Nazis that need to be killed, So it seems like they're going ahead, whatever, right? So Baruch Hashem, we got 50 of them. That's not bad, right? Not bad for 24 hours, whatever, right? So yeah, Baruch Hashem. We'll get them. And so God willing, we'll see you Sunday. Baruch Hashem, Laila Tov.
Thank you so much.
All the best. Shabbat Shalom, bro.
Rabbi,
I'm here.
I want to ask you if you're familiar with the book of Amos.
I'm sorry. What was the question?
The book of Amos. It's a short read, but they're about the third pasuk in line. It is talking about Gaza. It says, "For 3 sins and for 4, I will not turn away your wrath. I will annihilate every Palestinian."
Oh, okay. Yeah. I remember those verses. I remember them.
And then it's saying, "For all the Rashaim of Israel and Judea, I will not turn away your wrath." He's going to get rid of them, and I think those are all the woke ones.
I hope you're right. Let's see. Well, we'll see, right? Well,
righteous remnant, those who love Hashem, He preserves.
God bless you. God bless you. You have a good spirit, Baruch Hashem. You have a good spirit. Shabbat Shalom. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. God bless.
All the best. Bye.